There is no pulse under my fingers, and he is breathing in exact time with mine. By the end of this, you'll understand why I check my own face in the mirror every night before I lock the scale house. There's one detail about what happened to Del Ambrose that never made it into any report, and once I tell you what it is, you'll understand why nobody in Corbin's Landing says his name above a whisper anymore. I've run the night scale at the Corbin's Landing co-op for 11 years, and until this spring, the strangest thing that ever happened on my shift was a seal getting into the ice house. The job is simple, if you don't mind the hours. Boats come in through the fog whenever the tide and the fish decide, not whenever the clock says. So you sit in the scale house at the end of a pier with a logbook, a two-way radio, and a coffee pot that's been the same coffee pot since before I started. You weigh what comes off each boat, you write down the number, the crew and the time, and you wait for the next set of running lights to come sliding out of the fog toward you. Corbin's Landing has maybe 400 people, most of them tied to the water one way or another, and the fog is the one thing everybody agrees on. It comes in most nights, sits on the bay like a held breath, and doesn't fully leave until well past sunrise some mornings. You learn to read boats by their running lights before you can read their names. Del Ambrose has skippered the Constance out of this harbour longer than I've been weighing catch. He's the kind of man this whole town measures things by. First boat out, last one to complain. First one to buy a round when somebody's slow month gets bad enough. Everybody at the bar knows the story of his hand. A long line hook buried clean through his left palm when he was 19. Pulled it out himself rather than lose the set, and wears the scar like a medal. Pale, thick, curved like a comma, right across the meat of his left palm. I've shaken that hand probably 4,000 times. The first wrong thing happened on a Tuesday in April, and I want to be honest that it didn't feel wrong at the time. It felt like a mistake in my own log. The Constance came in at 11:40, Del at the wheel, 310 pounds of haddock, logged and gone by midnight, same as any night. Then at 1:15, running lights again, same slip, same boat number stenciled on the bow. I remember thinking, fog's playing tricks, some other boat must look like his. It wasn't. It was the Constance, and it was Del, and his crew came off it with 310 pounds of haddock to unload, the same weight, the same fish, near as I could tell in the dark, all over again. I told him straight out, "You already unloaded, Del. I've got it in the book from an hour ago." He looked at me the way you'd look at someone pointing out the obvious. "Try again, Wyatt," he said. "We're due." Not annoyed, not confused, just flat, like a man repeating something he'd been told to say. I logged it as a scale error and went home telling myself that. What I didn't clock until later, going back over it in my head, was the crew. Two deckhands I've known for years, and neither one of them looked at me while we weighed the fish a second time. Not unfriendly. Just careful, the way you're careful not to look directly at something on the road you'd rather not have seen. One of them, a kid named Petey who usually won't shut up about the socks, didn't say a single word the whole unload. I told myself he was tired. Everybody on that dock was tired that year, one way or another. Here's the detail I need you to hold on to, because it comes back later, and it's the whole reason I'm recording this. I checked the harbour stock camera the next morning, mostly to prove myself wrong. The timestamp from 1:15 showed the Constance tied up in slip 6. The timestamp from 12 minutes earlier, showed the Constance tied up in slip 6, and, in the corner of the same frame, the Constance also idling out past the breakwater, running lights on, heading back in, two of the same boat, on the same tape, at the same time. I watched it 4 times. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't have a way to say it out loud that didn't sound like I needed sleep. For a couple weeks, that's all it was. A strange tape I didn't mention to anybody. A scale entry I quietly crossed out. Nothing you'd build a fear around. I've worked nights long enough to know your eyes lie to you around 3 in the morning. I told myself that a lot that April. Then Del shook my hand at the bar, the way he does every Friday, and his scar was on the wrong hand. Right palm. Same pale curve, same comma shape, same thickness. I'd know that scar blind. Just on the other hand, like someone had picked him up and set him back down mirrored. I actually laughed. I said something like, "Since when'd you switch hands?" And he just smiled and said, "The light in here's bad, Wyatt. Always has been. And it is bad light." I told myself that for another 2 weeks too. I want to tell you it was just Del, because that would almost be bearable. One man, one bad joke of a coincidence. It wasn't just Del. Nadia, who runs the harbour office, mentioned to me offhand that her sister swore she saw her own husband twice in one night. Once walking into their house at 8, and once still down at the co-op unloading gear at 8:15, 10 minutes walk away. Nadia laughed when she said it. Said her sister must have had the time wrong. Nobody in this town frames any of it as strange. They mention it the way you'd mention an odd weather pattern and move on to the next thing. That's the part that still gets me. Not that it was happening, but that nobody wanted to stop and look at it straight on. I actually tried, once, to say something real to Nadia about it. The tape, the 2 boats, the scar. I got about 2 sentences in before she cut me off, gentle but firm. The way you'd redirect somebody who'd had one too many at the bar. "Wyatt, you've been running that scale alone too many nights in a row," she said, and patted my arm, and that was the end of the conversation. She wasn't being cruel. I don't think she was even really dismissing me. It was more like she genuinely couldn't hold the thought still long enough to look at it. The way you can't hold a wet fish still on a scale. It just wants to slide off, every time, back into the ordinary version of the story. If you're getting the feeling right now that something in this town had already decided not to notice, you're right, and it took me far too long to feel it too. That's how it actually happened to me. Slow, deniable, one bad joke of a coincidence at a time. By May, I was watching for it. That's its own kind of sickness, watching a whole town for a detail that shouldn't matter. I started keeping a private log, separate from the co-ops, times, names, which hand, which side, cross-referenced against old photos on the bar wall where I could get them. Corbin's Landing has a lot of old photos on its walls. Fishing towns keep their dead and their old scars framed up where everyone can see them, so it wasn't hard to check. Every single asymmetry I could verify against a photograph from before that April had, at some point after, quietly swapped sides. A missing pinky finger on someone's right hand, in an old photo, and now on their left. A lazy eye that used to droop left, now drooping right. Carly Whitfield, who runs the bait shop, has a strawberry birthmark the size of a thumbprint on her jaw. Every photo of her before this spring has it on the right side. In the school fundraiser calendar hanging behind her register right now, dated this June, it's on the left. She rang me up for a coffee that same week, and I couldn't make myself say a word about it. Small things. The kind of thing you'd only catch if you were already looking, and I was already looking. I checked the dock camera again, 3 separate nights. And 3 separate nights I got the same thing. A boat, or a person, appearing in 2 places on the same tape, at the same minute, without ever having walked or sailed between them. Whatever this is, it doesn't move through the town. It just arrives, twice, and one of the 2 isn't real, except it's exactly as real as the other one to touch, to talk to sit across from at the bar. If you've made it this far, and you're finding this hard to believe, I understand. I would have told you the same thing in March. If this is the kind of thing that gets under your skin, there's a new story here every night, and I'd rather you hear the rest of this one before you go anywhere. The night I stopped being able to tell myself it was nothing, the fog came in thicker than I'd seen it come in 11 years. The kind where the dock lights turn into soft orange smears and you can't see the end of your own pier from the scale house window. Dell's boat came in at midnight. Alone this time, no crew, which he never does, not ever, not in fog like that. He tied off himself, slow and careful, the way he always does, and he didn't call over to check in, which he always does. I walked out to him. I told myself I was going to ask about the crew, that's all. A normal question a scalehouse man asks a skipper on a strange night. What I actually did, when I got close enough, was reach out and take hold of his left wrist, the wrong wrist, the one with no scar on it now, and turn his hand up under the dock light to look for myself. There was no pulse under my fingers, not faint. Not hard to find. Absent, the way a coil of rope has no pulse, the way the rail under my other hand had no pulse. His skin was cold the way the water is cold, not the way a living man standing in fog is cold. And he was breathing. I could see his chest move, in exact time with mine, like a mirror does. Like something that had been waiting for a rhythm to copy, and had finally gotten close enough to take mine. He didn't pull his hand away. He just looked at me, calm, the way Dell is always calm. That's what made it so much worse. And he said, "He's already home, Wyatt. You should go home too." That's all. No explanation. Nothing about how or why or what he was. Just that one flat sentence, and then he walked past me up the pier toward town, toward Dell's house, toward Dell's wife, who would call him Hon in the morning and never once think to check his hand. 3 days later, a lobster boat working the current 40 miles down the coast pulled a body out of the water. It took the county a week to confirm it, because bodies in that kind of cold don't confirm easy. But I already knew before anyone said his name out loud. Left palm. Pale scar, curved like a comma, exactly where it always should have been. They buried the real Del Ambrose on a Thursday, with about 60 people at the service, and the other one stood at the graveside with Dell's wife's hand in his. I made myself look at his palm as I passed, because it was the one thing I still knew how to check. The scar was on the left again. Back on the correct hand, pale and curved, and exactly where it always should have been, like it had never been anywhere else. And that's when I understood the towel was gone. Whatever had come in wearing him had finished settling. There was nothing left on him to catch. I didn't say anything at the funeral. I want to be honest with you about that too. I stood there and shook the wrong Dell's hand along with everyone else, because I didn't have a sentence that wouldn't get me quietly moved off the night shift, or worse, and because some part of me understood, standing in that fog, that whatever decided Dell was due had already made its choice, and mourning out loud wasn't going to undo it. That's the cost of this. Not that something impossible happened. That it happened, and the town simply absorbed it, the way it absorbs everything the water gives back wrong. If this story is the kind that's going to sit with you tonight, that's exactly what it's supposed to do. Subscribe, because there's a new one waiting here tomorrow. I still run the night scale. I don't know what else a man does with 11 years and a mortgage. But I've started doing something I never used to do, which is check my own reflection before I lock up. Really check it, not just glance, because I've got an old scar of my own, a thin white line above my left eyebrow from a boat hook when I was 22, and I've gotten into the habit of touching it every night before I leave, just to be sure of which side it's still on. Last night, closing up, I looked into the dark glass of the scale house window the way I do every night now, and for half a second, less than half a second, barely long enough to call it seeing, the scar in the reflection was on the right. Then I blinked, and it was back where it's always been, above my left eyebrow, exactly where it should be. I've told myself it was the fog distorting the glass. I've told myself that every night since. I keep a photograph of my own face in my wallet now, an old one, from before any of this started, so I've got something to check myself against in case my own memory ever starts agreeing with the wrong side. I haven't looked at it in the dark yet. I'm not sure I want to know, some night, that it doesn't match.